Now I want to go to Hussein Askary. He's the Southwest Asia coordinator for all of our work for Executive Intelligence Review, and also, of course, he plays a very important role in the Schiller Institute. He, as I said, is actually the co-author of a report that I don't have actually here right now, uh, which is the third or fourth, I think, actually, of the versions of the. I think he's looking for it there so he can show it. Of our New Silk Road becomes the World Land Bridge Report. There we have it. He's got it. Okay, great. All right, Hussein, I'm sure you're very happy and eager to follow up that presentation. And so take it away.
Thank you very much, Dennis, and I thank Harley for the introduction, and also Shakil, my friend, for the great insights he's providing us from his standpoint and from the viewpoint. The book Dennis talked about is Extending the New Silk Road to West Asia and Africa, produced 2017, of course, with other colleagues in the Schiller Institute, Jason Ross specifically. But I have to oblige my friend and colleague Diane Sayre that I am always presenting an optimistic view of things. This is not ivory tower. It's a scientific principle I learned from Lyndon LaRouche, which says it's the future which determines the present. Because our view of where we want to be in the future determines what we do today. So that's also, as my friend Shakil says, we should look at the future of this region and Afghanistan through the eyes of an Afghani child. What kind of future this child wants to have. And then to fulfill that dream, we can start planning and discussing things, not from the standpoint of the past, all the horrible things that happened, although we need to learn from the past because that's important, but we need to look at the future through the lens of an Afghani child or an African child or whatever. And that's really, for me, it has become a scientific viewpoint, because when I joined the Schiller Institute and the LaRouche movement in 1995 and met with Lyndon LaRouche and Helge Sepp-LaRouche, we were already talking about the New Silk Road, the Eurasian land bridge, and it looked like a remote dream, but we worked very hard to make sure that this is what's going to be the future of mankind, where all nations can work together, and once and for all we get rid of geopolitics. And Afghanistan crisis now, lo and behold, is carrying with it, as the Chinese say, a crisis which carries with it within itself an opportunity to change things. Change terrible things we inherited from the past and build beautiful things into the future. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. Not much analysis. Of course, I disagree, of course, with all the reports that have been, that all the horror reports that the Taliban are taking over the country, they are bringing down the Afghan flag, this and that. That, as Shakil said, what we need now is to have cool heads intervening. And right now, there are cool heads intervening in the region. And probably we will see the end of geopolitics right in the place where geopolitics all started, the Great Game. I mean, Harley Schlanger mentioned this book, The Great Game, a wonderful book I got as a gift from our colleague, Michael Billington. Everybody should read it. It's a very good historical record of how the British used Afghanistan as a buffer zone against the Russian Empire as a game. And the same person, the very person who coined the term, O'Connelly, the term Great Game, he was beheaded in Bukhara by the emir there. So that's a very funny anecdotal aspect. But if we look at the Afghanistan, I would like to share with you a presentation I made. You see, Afghanistan is literally a piece of rock. I will go back then and describe it as the humans living there. But Afghanistan is a piece of rock, is an extension of the Hindu Kush Mountains and the Himalayas. and it separates Central Asia from South Asia, which was the purpose of the British Empire. You can see this, if I can point the cursor, this what my friend Shakil said, the Badakhshan province, but this is called the Wakhan Corridor. This was created by the British through treaties with the local tribal leaders, but also then the Russians accepted it as this is the breaking line between the Russian Empire and the British Empire. You look around Afghanistan, you see all these nations, and many of these are flat, but Afghanistan is a huge rock. It's a very rigid country. It's also very dry. And the British lost 3 wars. That's why it's called the graveyard of empires. The Soviets lost there. And finally, the United States and NATO, of course, they have to withdraw now. The purpose of invading Afghanistan then and now has been to use Afghanistan to destabilize the surrounding countries and split Eurasia. That was the purpose, not to control Afghanistan, but to use Afghanistan as a buffer zone and as a hand grenade to attack other nations. And we know that the situation in Afghanistan, both in terms of terrorism, have affected every single country in the region. There are terrorist groups in Pakistan, in Iran, in Turkmenistan, in Uzbekistan, in Tajikistan, and in China, who were born out of the Brzezinski, Bernard Lewis, British, Anglo-American great game in the Afghan war against the Soviets. And we also have the growth of the opium since 2011 in Afghanistan, which is used as an opium war against Iran, Pakistan, Central Asian nations, and first and foremost, Russia, because around in 2019, for example, 18,000 Russians died of overdoses of drugs. So Afghanistan now can suddenly become a cradle of peace for all of Eurasia. What is required is to go away from geopolitics and get Afghanistan on what I call the Belt and Road to Peace. As my friend Shakil agrees with me, if you look at the countries around Afghanistan, you have Iran, you have Pakistan, you have nearby India, you have China, the world's second biggest economy and the driver of the Belt and Road Initiative. You have Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. And then behind them, you have, of course, further, you have Russia, and so on. So what we need is to embrace Afghanistan, to envelope Afghanistan, not with military force, not sending drones to bomb weddings and funerals, as NATO and the United States have done in the past 20 years, but to send a message that we want to help you rebuild your country. That should be the message. Now, there are many structures that can be used in achieving that goal. As Helga Tseblarush, the chairwoman of the Schiller Institute, have said, if we don't get the major powers, especially the permanent 5, in the United Nations Security Council, we cannot have peace anywhere in the world. And therefore, like, if we have a mechanism which is enveloping Afghanistan, it does not include the United States. But if the United States wants to play a positive role, it can engage these nations in providing peace through economic development. And we have the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which was created after the fall of the Soviet Union. It's a security organization. But if you look at the nations involved in this, this includes almost half of the world population. In a very sensitive area, you have China, Russia, and India, 3 of the major powers, of the 4 powers. And then we have, of course, all Central Asia. We have Pakistan and India, who are supposed to be enemies. They're both members in the same organization. We have, in green, we have Afghanistan and Iran as observers in this organization. And we have Mongolia. Now, the Chinese foreign minister is visiting by person, breaking the rules of the COVID, all the member nations in Central Asia and also all the Shanghai Cooperation Organization nations to discuss what to do about Afghanistan. Now, unlike the hysteria and geopolitical nonsense we hear in the media, is that actually former rivals are working together now to stabilize the situation in Afghanistan. Iran, as was mentioned earlier, hosted a meeting of both the Afghani government and the Taliban. Now, in Iran, for many years, the Taliban were the worst enemy, because when Taliban took over Afghanistan, they went into the Iranian consulate in Mazar-e-Sharif in 1998 and massacred all the diplomats in the consulate. And the Iranians never forgot that. But now they say, we put that behind our back to achieve peace and stability in Afghanistan. Iran and Pakistan have high-level arrangements to contain the situation. India is involved with both Russia and Iran, and to also get a discussion going on. You have all kinds of diplomatic moves going on there to stabilize the situation and make sure that the Taliban are brought to the negotiations table. As my friend Shakil said, the Taliban are not as the other, ISIS or Al-Qaeda. They have a certain idea of their as a nationalist grouping, but also they have support in the population. But what is important is that what's going on in Afghanistan does not affect the rest. We have a certain collective security treaty organization, which is Russia, Azerbaijan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and so on, where there are military, but nobody is thinking about using military force. Not Russia, not China, not Iran. Nobody is intending to use military force in Afghanistan. They learned the lesson, which the British and the Americans and the Soviets learned very hard. But what I mean is that there are certain structures you can use to change the situation. Now, talking about the solutions to things, because this is where the future lies. We in 2000, already in 1997, in 96, I was involved with other members of the LaRouche movement and the Schiller Institute in putting together the first ever comprehensive New Silk Road Eurasian Land Bridge report. And Mrs. Helge LaRouche was in China discussing this, but the Chinese already in 1996 accepted the New Silk Road as an economic strategy, but it was not mature then. But by 2013, China announced, President Xi Jinping announced the Belt and Road Initiative from Kazakhstan, which is a Central Asian country, and also from Indonesia. But already then, we put together the report, the New Silk Road becomes the world land bridge, and we have a special chapter there on Central Asia and ending geopolitics. And there we have a thorough outline of all kinds of connectivity, power, water, agriculture, industrial projects outlined there in 2014 as a way of, because all the Central Asian countries were affected by the situation in Afghanistan, actually. Also in the report, there's an appendix from the Russian institution, which is connected to the Russian Academy of Sciences, which we included in our report on developments in Afghanistan, but also integrating Afghanistan into the larger Central Asia, South Asia, by building corridors of development. That includes railways, power lines, gas and oil pipelines, water pipelines, and all kinds of things. And it's very thoroughly described there. Also, it goes through what the Russians already know. The Russians have very good geological surveys of many parts of Eurasia. And it also outlines where the minerals exist in Afghanistan and how they intersect the development corridors of Afghanistan. Now, we're talking about minerals, natural resources, and the role of the United States. I think the United States can play a role in achieving peace in Afghanistan and all Eurasia, not by military force, but by engaging its scientific, technological, and industrial capabilities, which are part also of the military tradition of the United States, into this process of reconstruction in Afghanistan and also in all Eurasia. Instead of all these wars, which benefit no one, we can have win-win situation. I thought there was a study. This is the best thing the United States did in Afghanistan. It was done by geologians and engineers in the US Geological Survey. And I happen to know some people who worked on that project from the European side, because it was a huge project. It explored the whole territory of Afghanistan to figure out non-oil and gas minerals in Afghanistan that can be used for economic development. And they did a thorough, fantastic study. I already in 2012, 13, I read the study. It was developed further. In the media, they said, oh, Afghanistan, they have $2 trillion of minerals. You know, that's what is wrong with geopolitics. They think only in terms of money, not in terms of how would this mineral wealth benefit the Afghani people and other peoples. This study, it's available on the website of the United States Geological Survey, and it has been updated several times. It's a fantastic study, it's very useful, and also it shows that Afghanistan has not only some of the largest copper and iron ore reserves in Asia, but it has also the so-called rare earth minerals, special minerals that are very crucial for modern industry, like lithium, like chrome, tantalum, all kinds of very, very rare metals that are now very important for the modern economy, especially electronics and telecommunications and so on. As the US Geological Survey did a fantastic outline of where these exist and how, you know, but they did not, of course, outline how it could be used, because those who decide the policy in the United States are not engineers, they are not farmers, they are not teachers, but these are geopoliticians, like the kinds of others talked about, Brzezinski, who follow British geopolitical scheme that the world is a fight of all against all. If we don't take these, the Chinese or the Russians or the Indians will take them. So we will make sure that nobody uses these minerals. And therefore, Afghanistan's mineral wealth was never exploited. Now, the Chinese came in 2017 and said, the government of Afghanistan said, well, we have all this mineral wealth, we want to use it. So they did an international bidding, and two Chinese companies won the bid. They made the cheapest offer to invest in the largest copper mine in all Central Asia, which is called Mes Aynak, which is interesting of historical reasons. But also there's also the iron ore mineral reservoir Haji Dak, which the American Geological Survey also identified. But the project never got off ground because the Chinese company got attacked when they were doing the surveys already in that region by terrorist groups. But then also there were technical problems, because to do that, you need to build railways and also to bring coal from the western part of the country and build a 400 megawatt power plant to melt the ore into this area is interesting also because there, from the Bronze Age, you had settlements there, prehistoric, but also Buddhist settlements. But some people used this area to mobilize against the Chinese companies, and therefore a huge international US-backed, EU-backed campaign to save the historical artifacts in that area where you have the iron ore minerals. So, of course, we have to preserve, we have to save these historical things, but this was used as a way to attack the Chinese project and stop it. But the Chinese themselves had technical problems, so the project never got off ground. Now, concerning the integrating of Afghanistan into the Belt and Road Initiative, the New Silk Road, Afghanistan is squeezed between two of the most important corridors of the New Silk Road or the Belt and Road. One is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, outlined here as B, and then we have the China, Central Asia, West Asia, the Silk Road, which goes from the Xinjiang Muslim province in China into Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and also into Turkmenistan and Iran, and then ends in Turkey. That's outlined in F. So Afghanistan is the missing link in this whole situation. It's not connected. As I said earlier, Afghanistan is a piece of rock. It's very rough to build things there, but it's not impossible because the Chinese built high-speed railway to the Tibet in the Himalayas, to the most rugged areas in China, and it's possible to overcome these situations. Now, at the same time, we have the Afghanistan. If you look at the map of the population density, it's concentrated in the eastern part of the country and also in the western part. So in the middle, you have very little population, but you have both the population and mineral resources of Afghanistan concentrated in certain areas which you need to bridge through development corridors, infrastructure. And interestingly, I looked at the demographics of Afghanistan. It's fantastic because that's why I say the future determines what's going on. Because if you look at the Afghani population of 37 million people, 3 million are refugees outside Afghanistan. But 34 million, if you look at the population, 46% of the Pakistani population is below the age of 15. Okay? And above the age of 65, you have only 2.4% of the population. The rest, so you have like 98.7% of the population are below the age of 65, but most of them, 80% are below the age of 30. So you have the whole future in front of you. But what is needed is to provide those young people with the means to thrive, to use their creative potential and build their economy and get into the future and integrate with the rest of the world economy along the lines of this New Silk Road or the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, as my friend Shakil said, you cannot present ideas to the Afghanis because they are very stubborn, nationalistic, anti-foreigner people for obvious reasons. They have been attacked the whole time. You have to ask the Afghanis, what do they think about these ideas? What are their aspirations? And therefore, I brought this from the Afghanistan Foreign Ministry. They have a special think tank on Afghanistan. It's called the Economic Cooperation Conference on Afghanistan. And they have outlined a number of projects and integrated regional ideas into the reconstruction of Afghanistan by building, for example, the so-called ring around Afghanistan, because you have railways now built from all countries around Afghanistan to the border of Afghanistan, but inside Afghanistan you have nothing. And the reason is we had NATO inside the country. NATO does not build railways. As Obama's national security advisor, Susan Rice, told the African ambassadors, we don't do infrastructure. So therefore, Afghanistan, of all the countries in the region, never built infrastructure in the past 20 years of US-British occupation. And therefore, there you have outlined, and the Afghani government, and now as our friend Shakil says, the Taliban also accept the fact that you can integrate Afghanistan's own infrastructure projects into the larger region, and so that everybody benefits. So you can connect the railways, the oil and gas projects from Turkmenistan into Afghanistan to Pakistan to India, the so-called Tapi line, which the United States and Britain have been talking about for 3 decades, but it was never built. You can integrate Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. You can bring in the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor from China into Afghanistan. And all these countries have said, and I have documents, I don't have time to read them, that there are meetings between Chinese and Central Asian countries. They talk about the Belt and Road Initiative and integrating Afghanistan. Iran, Pakistan, and China foreign ministers met just last month, and they said we should intensify our cooperation on the Belt and Road and bring in Afghanistan into the picture. So this is the kind of thing you need to do to get the Afghani people and their leadership, whoever they are, to see the future through the eyes of their children, how their country will look like if they accept this offer. Somebody has to make the offer. I think there are intensive now moves. As I said, the Chinese foreign minister is in Central Asia. He will visit all the countries around Afghanistan. Pakistan is in advanced discussions with the Afghanis, with the Iran and the China on the prospects for peace and stability in Afghanistan. But as LaRouche warned about the Israeli-Arab peace process, if you don't put on the table from the beginning the economic development you are thinking about creating, never discuss religious, political, and other solutions, or democracy, or the state kind of government you want. Start with the economic development. Show the Afghani people and their leaders how their country will look like in the future. And show them the willingness that you will help them create that future. And then they will say, we take the deal. You have some crazy people who will say no, but the majority will say, that's the kind of future we dream about. That's the kind of future we want. And I think the United States and Europe can be part of this. Just to warn you that there will be people who are against this. The World Bank, don't get the World Bank involved in this. Don't get the EU involved in this. Don't get the US and Britain involved in this unless they throw away all the economics books they have learned, as LaRouche has told us. I have just picked up this study of the World Bank. It's presented to the World Bank by a group of American so-called economists, certified idiots in the words of Lyndon LaRouche, about building railways in Afghanistan. And this is what they recommend. They told the World Bank it is unlikely that many of the schemes conceived for railways in Afghanistan should or even could be constructed. Some even if constructible may not be finally viable. Instead, constructing these rail lines will create a drain on the Afghan nation's economy. So the ideology here in the West, if you don't have money, you cannot build railways, you cannot build hospitals, you cannot build schools, you cannot build roads, you cannot build dams, you cannot build power plants. This ideology should be thrown in the dustbin of history together with geopolitics. And economics should, once again, as Lyndon LaRouche has identified, go back to its human cradle, to its human origin, that all resources start from the mind of human beings who are creative and think about the future. And when you look at this problem in Afghanistan, look always through the lens of the Afghani child who is thinking, what is going to be my future? And I think here I have to stop, and I hope you got my point.